Good morning, everybody. Thank you. It's great to be with you again. We had some great meetings in the early stages of King's Arms when it was just 20 people in somebody's living room. You remember? You weren't there? You missed that part. Oh, you missed the fun part, yeah. We had some great times, but we've had some pretty good times today, too. What are you longing for? You know, what's coming to your mind most often that you're seeking? You know, we all have things that we long for. And very often we find ourselves thinking, you know, if only I had this, then I would be fully content. If only this could happen, if only I could see this, or if only I could do this, then I could be content. And so we can end up focusing on things like possessions, or status, or a nice family, or some kind of worldly success, or maybe even just like some position at church. You know, if only I could be on the worship team, you know, then I would be satisfied. Never mind that you can't sing, you know. We get focused on these other things, thinking that they will bring us true and total contentment. But we are deceived. Because the truth is, whatever you accomplish, whatever you have, it's never going to be enough. You know, I see this with pastors a lot, you know. If only my church were bigger, then I would be content. But there's always somebody who has a bigger church. Unless you're Paul Yonggi Cho in South Korea. And then he wasn't ever satisfied either. He always wanted more because, you know, that's the nature of the beast. There's always going to remain an itch for something that's not yet satisfied. Because there's really only one thing that can truly, truly satisfy completely. And that's what I want to talk about today. And we're going to do it from Psalm 63. So get your Bibles out. Pull out your devices that have a Bible. Some of you have devices. I loved my print Bibles, but eventually I had to switch to the device because the print on the print Bible got too small. And if you laughed, you've betrayed your age right there. So now, the screen doesn't show this, but there's an important part of the text that's before what you see on the screen. So that's why I want you to look on your actual Bible, because the way it actually reads is Psalm 63, a psalm of David when he was in the desert of Judah. That's really important. The context in which he wrote this. And I think we have a picture of the desert of Judah. Yeah? Can we get the picture? There we go. Okay, that's the wilderness of Judea. So that's where this is happening. It's a very dry place. And this is a place that's full of caves. And so there was a period in David's life where he's on the run from King Saul, who had decided he was a threat to his kingship. So he's been turned into an outlaw, and he's living in this place, hiding on the run and living in caves. And in the midst of that situation, he writes this psalm. Now let's look at it. You, God, are my God. Earnestly, I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you. In a dry and parched land where there is no water, I have seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. I will fully satisfied. See that? Fully satisfied, he says. As with the richest of foods, with singing lips, my mouth will praise you. On my bed, I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night. Because you are my help, I sing in the shadow of your wings. I cling to you. Your right hand upholds me, and those who want to kill me will be destroyed. They will go down to the depths of the earth. They will be given over to the sword and become food for jackals. But the king will rejoice in God. And all who swear by God will glory in him, while the mouths of liars will be silenced. So here is David in the wilderness, on the run, hiding in caves. He's in bad circumstances. His circumstances are about as bad as it gets. And you'd expect him maybe to be longing for comfort. Like, I'm longing for some food and water and maybe a bed. I've been going now. This is the third service. I'm starting to long for lunch. You'd expect him to be doing that, but no. You'd expect him to be maybe longing for justice or revenge, because what's happened to him is completely unfair. But no, that's not what he's longing for. You'd expect him maybe to be longing for his former position in life, but that's not even mentioned. You'd expect him to be longing for escape. Oh Lord, just get me out of here. Nope. None of that. Now, we all at some point in our life, find ourselves in the wilderness, in bad circumstances. If you've been following Jesus more than 6 months, you've found it. And in the wilderness, it's lonely and it's hot and it's hard. But David isn't even thinking about any of that. He's not reacting the way we would expect. Why? Because something strange and wonderful has happened to him. Something's happened to him that changed everything. Something's happened to him that made his current bad circumstances completely irrelevant and unimportant. What could that be? What's happened to this man? And he tells us in verse 2, I've seen you in the sanctuary and beheld your power and your glory. He saw the Lord. He didn't just hear about the Lord. He didn't just read about the Lord. He didn't just sing about the Lord. He didn't even have a nice, safe, abstract vision of the Lord. I have a picture of Jesus. Nope. He saw the Lord. A real encounter with the living God. Apparently the Lord spoke to him, and he was filled with power. The power of God's love. Or to use his term, loving kindness. Like the prophet Isaiah, David says, I saw the Lord. When Isaiah saw the Lord, he said, woe is me, I'm undone. David saw the Lord, and he was changed. Changed forever. When you've seen the Lord, you can't unsee the Lord. There's no going back. You're going to be changed. David was changed. He came out of that experience. He knew for certain who he was, regardless of what his circumstances were. He knew, I'm the king. I may be living in the desert right now, but I'm the true king. He knew. He came away from that experience filled with a powerful love that made all other desires fade, like to nothing. Like home, family, food, water, nothing. Unimportant compared to the glorious splendor of the presence of God. He came away from that experience more alive than he'd ever been. Doesn't say it in those words, but most people who've had that kind of experience, and there have been a good many over the centuries, they'll describe it in kind of terms of like every cell of their body being set on fire or being energized or becoming to life. It's like all of a sudden there's something else in you. I've experienced the presence of God so powerfully, I thought my feet were going to leave the ground. I was going to start flying around the room. You know, the funny thing is when I felt like that, I was actually flopping on the floor. He came away from that experience fully confident and without fear. Yep, he's still in the wilderness. Yep, he's still on the run. Yep, the king is still chasing him, but he's without fear. Understand this. If God is with you, if God is for you, and you've seen his presence, you've seen his power, you've heard his voice, speaking his promises to you, what on earth is going to stand against you? What on earth is there to be afraid of? Nothing. There's nothing. Even the fear of death itself no longer can have power over you because you've seen the Lord. And he became unshakable. Everything else shakes. Everything else changes. Our bodies change, like it or not. I know all too well. We all know you can think everything is going as it always has. But in 3 days, God brought the world to a complete standstill for a pandemic. Everything can be shaken. Everything can be changed except the unmovable, all-powerful, and infinitely loving presence of an unchanging God that never changes and cannot be shaken. That is why he's so certain at the end that his enemies will disappear. They'll be destroyed. They'll be gone. Because why? Because they're only enemies. They can't last. There's only one thing that's going to last. The presence of God. And so he's unshakable. Wouldn't you like to become unshakable? You know, here we are. We're in this room with thousands of years after this was written. We have enemies. Maybe it's the Russians. The Russians sometimes think they're our enemies. If you've gotten very far in following Jesus, you have learned that your real enemies are to be found in your own heart and mind. Right? Yeah, you know that. And we wage mental and spiritual battles. Battles against the lies that would rob us of God and his goodness. Those are enemies. But if we could only behold the power and glory of the presence of God, we would become also unshakable in the face of all of our battles. That's why the Apostle Paul prays that his followers would be strengthened with power by the Spirit so that they could know this love of God that is so powerful. They would then be unshakable. find myself in church meetings all the time, and I'm praying, oh God, if they could only know, your greatness, your power, your presence. If they could only enter in, if they could only see you, Lord, if they only knew, they would be unshakable. David came away, most importantly, from that experience, he says, fully satisfied. Fully satisfied. He says, it's satisfied like the richest of food, like I can't cram anything else in. There is nothing else that I want. I'm completely satisfied, and yet, he still wants more. Nothing can begin to compare. What's water compared to the presence of God? The presence of the Lord is the sweetest, most desirable thing in the universe. It's really like God's drug is himself. Like, you want to get addicted to God, because that's the best high there is. It's like incredible. I remember when I was in university, of course, there were all kinds of, recreational drugs going on around me, and people would always say, you want some of this? I said, why? Like, I got something better, and it's free. And there are no hangovers, and there are no bad trips. So, yeah. It's the best thing ever. And he says, your loving kindness is better than life. And he couldn't get enough. It's so good, so wonderful, so satisfying. All he can think about is getting back in the presence of God. So here he is, on the run, in the wilderness, in the desert, hiding in caves, and all he can think about is, when can I see you again? I seek you. I thirst for you. My whole being longs for you. I'm constantly thinking of you. I remember you in the middle of the night. I'm clinging to you. His desires are completely directed towards the presence of God. The man is obsessed. Completely obsessed with the presence of God. When you've experienced this sweetness of his presence, you become obsessed. Maybe a little bit crazy. And you're always looking. When can I see you again? Always looking for his presence. Is he going to come now? Will today be another day where he comes and visits us? Will he be here now? I've become that kind of person. I'm constantly going, is he here? Is he in this place? Is he going to come today? Will we get to see him? Obsessed. And the funny thing is we do tend to find what we're looking for. We find what we're looking for. About a month ago, my wife and I traveled about 1,500 miles west to Oregon, where my youngest son lives. He has 3 daughters, my granddaughters, and they were at the end of their school term, and they had spent the year in a singing and dance class, and it was recital time. So while we were there, we went to the recital for the grandkids, as you do. And we get there, and it's this school, and there's all these different groups, and they're all going to be performing the routines that they've worked out. And the room is absolutely jammed with 1,000+ relatives. Many of whom looked like other grandparents. And as it went, it's a dance school. So what are they dancing to? And they're dancing to hip-hop music and Broadway musicals mostly. Like, I'm 72. Like, I hate hip-hop. I can't sing to hip-hop. No apologies to those of you who like it. They seem to like it. Anyway, so I'm kind of putting up with the thing. We're going through all these hip-hop routines and occasionally a little Broadway musical routine, Disney. latest version of the same old thing. And I'm just there like, oh, there's my granddaughter. That's the one, like you do. And then one of the groups starts their routine. The song comes on. And I felt the presence of God come in the room. And I was like jumping in my seat. I said, what song is that? What song is that? What are they doing? Like, he's here. He's here now, like in the middle of all the hip hop. What's God doing here? And they were singing this song that I'd never heard. Nobody seemed to know what it was. It's called Salvation Mountain. And the words of the song were, I'm on my way to Salvation Mountain. I'm here to be changed. I'm here to be free. And did you feel the Spirit when I just said the words? It's a song about repentance and renewal in the presence of God. And the last line is, when can we meet again? And I was like a crazy man. Like, I came this close to jumping up and yelling to the room, he's here, he's here. He's moving up and down the aisles looking for desperate people who will trade in their whole life to have a little bit of God. So I had to content myself with looking up the song online, but it's like that. You become like that. Like, oh, he's here. So as David is like that, and he's thinking about the goodness of this experience, all he can do is give praise and glory and sing and rejoice in the Lord, because there's just no end. I visited you guys last November, and I had come from the night before a young adult conference with about 1,000 young people up in Nottingham that the Vineyard put on, called Cause to Live For. And that night, suddenly the presence of God came in the room. I can't even find words to describe it, but it felt like we were being almost crushed under the weight of his presence. And hundreds of young people went to their knees. And then we stood or they kneeled, stood or kneeled, for 30 minutes in complete silence. Not a word was spoken. And it's just like he pressed on us deeper, deeper, deeper. And tears coming down people's eyes. But complete silence. Not a word is spoken. No music. No sounds. Just silence for 30 minutes. And in a room with 1,000 people, 30 minutes in silence is a really long time. But nobody cared. Nobody moved. Nobody got up. Nobody shifted position. Nobody left to go to the loo. Nobody moved, because God was there. And at the end, he finally lifted enough that we could begin to worship. And then we worshiped like I've never seen for 3 hours, and nobody wanted to stop. We finally had to quit because the musicians basically couldn't stand any longer. We just got into the limits of their physical endurance, because God was there. In our time, there are many who believe in Jesus, maybe here, trying their best to live in a godly way, but they're living in spiritual poverty because they don't really know the presence of God. It's not enough, people, just to know about him. It's not enough just to come to church and hear the words. That's not enough. It's not enough just to hear a sermon. That's not enough. Those things that's not going to be enough to make you unshakable, to make you crazy, obsessed. You've got to experience his presence. A lot of us, we think we're in love with Jesus, but The truth is, we're not actually thinking about him that much. We're not obsessed. Why aren't we obsessed? Well, because you haven't seen him. You don't know. Because if you'd seen him, you would be obsessed. You would be thinking about him all the time. You'd be in the dance recitals thinking, is God going to show up here? And so your lives end up filled with other desires, other things. And we don't really expect that much from God, almost as if God wasn't really alive. And what that tends to lead to is we're struggling in the wilderness of our circumstances, struggling in the battles, our mental and spiritual battles, struggling with anxiety and fear, especially after the pandemic, when we found out that you can't count on anything. And I keep thinking, if only they knew. If only they knew. If they only knew. If they could only see, then they would not be afraid. They would be obsessed. They'd be longing. They'd be seeking. If they knew, they'd be free. If they knew, they'd be unshakable. If they knew, they'd be praising him constantly, regardless of their circumstances. If they knew, they'd be running to be in his presence again. If only they knew. Maybe right now you're saying, okay, I'd like to know. I'd like to see God. I'd like an experience like that. I want to see God. And I'm here to say, you can. Why do you think he put it in the book? But you're going to have to get serious. Or maybe more precisely, you got to get desperate. You got to get hungry. Hungry enough to hang out in the sanctuary until it finally breaks through. Those places where the presence of God tends to show up. Got to be hungry. Are you hungry for the presence of God? Are you desperate for him? Jesus says, blessed are the hungry, for they will be filled. It's not blessed are the apathetic. Well, if it happens, that'd be nice. You know, if you're like that, oh, it'd be nice, God, if you want that, I'll be happy to take that. That's not going to work. That's not going to get you anywhere. It's the hungry that get filled. So get hungry. You don't have to keep living like this. You can be changed like David was. You can be changed. Let's stand.